Pay attention to this security camera footage. 8:36 p.m., October 14, 2019, on East 12th Street, Austin. The Ring doorbell camera captures the moment Lena Morris, 24 years old, returns from her training ride, stepping onto the porch with her helmet still dusted with road grime. The yellow porch light falls across her shoulders, and just as Lena bends down to search for her keys, a figure in a black hoodie appears at the edge of the frame, moving quickly and decisively, as if he had been waiting for her there. Lena turns at the sound of footsteps, just for a split second. The hooded figure lunges forward, clamps a hand over Lena's mouth, yanks her hard toward the door, and pushes her inside the house. The helmet drops onto the porch step, clatters against the doorframe with a short, dry sound. Then the door slams shut. The camera is left with an empty hallway, the streetlight flickering once, and Lena never steps out again. This is the last time Lena Morris is seen alive. The next morning, at 6:27 a.m., a jogger passing by notices the back door of the house slightly ajar in an unusual way. As he approaches, he sees a motionless hand protruding from under the kitchen counter, pale and cold in the morning light. He immediately calls 911, voice trembling, only managing to say, "There's someone lying motionless in this house. I think she's dead." Police arrive at the scene and conduct a quick check. No signs of burglary, nothing missing, no evidence of forced entry. The house is too quiet, too tidy for a random attack. The initial forensic conclusion sends chills through everyone. Lena did not die in this house. Her body had been brought back after death occurred elsewhere, and that could only mean one thing. The perpetrator didn't just take her life, they deliberately tried to conceal the truth. So who had been waiting for Lena in the shadows? And what could drive someone to plan her abduction and murder? Money, hatred, or betrayal? To understand why Lena became the target of such a calculated scheme, we need to go back to who she really was, a woman whose life gave no apparent reason for anyone to want to harm her. Lena Morris was more than a cyclist. She was the embodiment of discipline, of overcoming adversity, of a dream taking shape. Born in Vermont, Lena grew up among mountain trails, where she learned self-reliance, perseverance, and the thrill of wind cutting across her face on every descent. At 24, she had become a rising name in the gravel cycling community, a young rider with real grit, whose victories came not from luck, but from thousands of hours of training. Friends described her as punctual to the heartbeat, gentle but strong, and living with purpose. Austin was her most important race of 2019. This trip was supposed to mark the start of a breakout season. Instead, it became her tragic endpoint. On the evening Lena disappeared, the last person to see her alive was no stranger. It was Evans Reese, a veteran rider in the scene, who had coached Lena on many long-distance techniques. They finished their training session in the neighborhood near East 12th Street, exchanged a few brief words about race strategy, then parted ways in the parking area. The camera there clearly records Evan leaving the area, climbing into his pickup truck, and driving south. Based on the timing of the attack, police quickly considered Evan the most logical suspect. He was the last to see her, he was near the scene, and he had a close relationship with the victim. Misdirection began with details that seemed too perfect to ignore: jealousy, internal team conflicts, pre-race tension. But one thing made police hesitate: Evan cooperated fully, never dodged questions, never resisted. His phone data and camera footage matched his statement perfectly, as if he had nothing to hide. And then as Evan's story gradually cleared, another name began surfacing in the accounts of those who knew them: Zoe Hartman, Evan's long-term girlfriend, a woman who was never loud, never dramatic, never involved in any trouble. People remembered Zoe for small things: her soft smile, her calm way of speaking, her near-perfect politeness, and it was precisely that which made her almost invisible to those around her. Zoe always stood one step back, one friend remarked. She observed more than she spoke. No one knew what she was thinking. In every story, Zoe appeared as a shadow, unobtrusive, unremarkable, yet always present at the edges of events. A quiet, discreet, unpredictable shadow. No one suspected that this very shadow would become the most crucial link in the entire tragedy of Lena Morris. In the summer of 2019, as Austin entered its hottest days, something unseen began brewing inside Zoe Hartman, a storm no one could see. One evening, while Evan was showering after training, Zoe, accidentally, or so she told herself, saw the text messages between him and Lena. The content was nothing overly intimate. They discussed race tactics, training times, simple check-ins. But to Zoe, every word became a needle piercing, an insecurity that had been simmering for a long time. She reread them repeatedly, scrutinizing every space, imagining things that never existed. Jealousy didn't arrive in a single moment. It crept into Zoe little by little, like fine dust. No one notices until it coats every surface. From then on, Zoe began tracking Lena in ways she herself didn't fully recognize had crossed normal boundaries. Every morning, Zoe opened Lena's Strava to see where she trained, for how long, at what speed. Every evening, Zoe scrolled through Instagram, reading every caption, noting every person Lena interacted with. When Lena arrived in Austin to prepare for the October race, Zoe knew her training schedule almost to the hour. No one knew how many times Zoe drove past Lena's rental house, just to look at the front door, the bike parked in the yard, or the light on in the living room. Several blurry photos taken from the driver's seat of a black Jeep were later found on Zoe's phone, images of Lena getting ready for morning rides, or returning in the afternoon, with her backpack on her shoulder. Those photos weren't in any album or folder, they were scattered among thousands of other files, like accidental traces of someone losing control of their obsession. But in reality, Zoe controlled everything. She bought zip ties at a hardware store, a few blocks from home, without using a loyalty card. She bought gloves at a different store, and paid in cash. And then she bought a burner phone, the kind that leaves almost no trace, usually seen only in situations where someone doesn't want to be found. At the end of August, Zoe rented a small storage unit on Decker Lake Road. The contract was in her name. The key pickup date was August 28th, a number that probably meant nothing to anyone else. But for Zoe, it was the day she wrote in her notebook, the place of ending. The unit was empty, cold gray concrete with nothing but the smell of damp dust. Yet Zoe stood inside it for a long time, as if visualizing how everything would unfold. When police later searched it, they found a small notebook hidden in Zoe's yoga bag, pages of notes on Lena's schedule, the hours she ran, the routes she took, even the days she did light training, and rest days. Next to it was a map of Austin marked in red pen, highlighting parks Lena had run in, coffee shops she frequented, and the house on East 12th Street, where she stayed during race week. There were no ranting lines in the notebook, no expressions of desperation, just lists, times and locations. All written in neat, careful handwriting, like someone preparing for an exam rather than a crime. That was what chilled the investigators. No outburst, no chaos, just quiet, steady, persistent preparation. An obsession with form, structure, and a clear goal. And when all the pieces were put together, there was only one conclusion. Zoe didn't snap. She calculated. That very calculation forced police to re-examine everything that happened the night Lena vanished. Not as a sudden attack, but as a step-by-step orchestrated plan. Reconstructing Lena's final minutes from the security footage didn't just help police pinpoint when the victim disappeared. It opened a chain of clues that led them steadily to the truth. Zooming in on the images, they clearly saw how Lena was intercepted right at the door. Her arms pinned, body twisted, legs buckling slightly before she was dragged inside. Investigators later found a long drag mark on the hallway tile, a thin, continuous scratch matching the direction of movement captured on camera. Forensics confirmed it was the victim's rubber-soled shoe being scraped hard across the floor while she was being restrained. There were no signs of fierce struggle, no screams that reached outside. It all happened fast and clean, as if the perpetrator had rehearsed it many times in their mind. From the moment Lena was pushed inside until Zoe carried her to the black Jeep, everything was out of camera view. But what happened afterward was reconstructed through forensics in the rented storage unit. Deep zip tie marks on Lena's wrists, long skid marks on the concrete floor, dust embedded under her fingernails, and dried water stains and patches on the walls, all showed the victim had struggled to break free, to find leverage, or to find a way out during the 5 hours she was held. The autopsy concluded Lena died in the storage unit, about an 11-minute drive from the scene, not in the rented house on East 12th Street. This explained why the injury patterns were completely inconsistent with the position in which she was found the next morning. That very discrepancy made investigators realize the killer had staged a false scene. Reviewing the alley camera behind the house, police spotted the black Jeep appearing at 2:06 a.m., headlights off as it approached. A female figure opened the trunk, bent down to lift something heavy inside, then left less than 2 minutes later. No one heard any noise. No one saw the killer's face, but the camera captured the walk, slow, steady, and purposeful. When police began tracing Jeep Grand Cherokee owners in the area, Evan Reese's name came up first because he was the last to see Lena. But within hours of checking parking lot cameras, phone data, and witness statements, Evan was cleared. His departure time matched GPS traces perfectly, with no sign of returning. The focus on Evan had seemed logical, but the story quickly shifted when they discovered another black Jeep that had frequently appeared near Lena's house in the days prior. It belonged to Zoe Hartman. The fact that Zoe's vehicle had traveled the back alley multiple times, especially during Lena's usual training hours, began drawing investigators' attention. Cell tower data from a burner phone activated exactly 3 weeks before the crime showed pings in the Decker Lake Road area, at the precise time forensics determined the victim was killed. This burner phone had no contacts, no call history, but was frequently powered on at locations matching the tracking map Zoe kept in her notebook. When the search expanded, police raided Zoe's rented storage unit. Inside, they found unused zip ties still in their packaging, identical to those used on Lena, along with a piece of duct tape still bearing skin cells matching the victim's DNA, and small shoe prints impressed in the concrete that matched Zoe's shoe size. Dust kicked up in an arc near the door indicated a heavy object had been dragged out, consistent with moving a body. Every forensic fragment and every small detail Zoe thought no one would notice came together into an irrefutable chain of logic. And when it all fit, only one name remained: Zoe Hartman. But while the police were finalizing the arrest paperwork, Zoe acted first. Zoe left Austin in less than 24 hours after Lena was found, as if she had prepared every step of her escape in advance. Traffic cameras captured the black Jeep leaving the city late that afternoon, heading straight toward the Laredo border. At a parking lot near the border area, the vehicle was found abandoned, cleaned to an eerie degree, with no identifying traces left, except for the road dust still clinging to the tires. From there, Zoe crossed into Mexico using a fake passport, moving continuously through several small towns, before catching a budget flight to Santa Teresa, Costa Rica, a coastal town crowded with tourists, where people come and go, and no one pays much attention to a new yoga instructor who just appeared. Throughout the 30 days after leaving Austin, Zoe blended into those tourist groups, teaching a few morning yoga sessions, eating dinner alone, and keeping everything to a bare minimum. But what Zoe didn't know was that U.S. Marshals had been tracking every card transaction, every internet signal, and every public camera appearance she made at airports and rest stops. While Zoe thought she had vanished off the map, in reality, her file had been moved to the top of the federal fugitive priority list. Finally, at a small hostel in Santa Teresa, while Zoe was folding towels in preparation for an early class, Costa Rican police along with U.S. Marshals burst in. Zoe didn't resist, didn't ask why, didn't show any surprise. She simply stood still, hands hanging loosely at her sides, her eyes dull and fixed on the tiled floor. Zoe's extradition to the United States happened quickly. In Austin, the Travis County courtroom was more crowded than usual. Lena's family sat in the front row, her mother's hands clenched so tightly they trembled. Evan appeared with a gaunt face and bloodshot eyes from many sleepless nights. When Zoe entered, head bowed, hair tied low, a murmur rippled through the room, like a cold gust of wind. Zoe didn't look at anyone, or seek any familiar gaze. She glided past them all, as if she were merely a shadow passing through a room full of strangers. The prosecutor presented the evidence one by one. Security camera footage of the abduction, drag marks in the hallway, skid marks on the concrete floor of the warehouse, Lena's DNA on the duct tape, the burner phone pings, matching Zoe's locations along with GPS data from the Jeep. Each piece, no matter how small, connected into a tight logical chain, a timeline so perfectly aligned that it left no room for any alternative hypothesis, except that Zoe was the one who carried out the entire act. Witnesses such as neighbors, a jogger, and the warehouse owner confirmed the missing pieces that forensics hadn't yet filled in. When asked, Zoe remained silent. She neither denied nor confessed. Her eyes didn't waver, didn't shed tears, showed no anger or remorse. Throughout the trial, that silence created a strange void, like a room deprived of air. Some called it indifference, others called it guilt, wrapped in an empty shell. The judge read the sentence in a courtroom, so quiet you could hear the faint metallic clink as Zoe's handcuffs shifted slightly. Zoe Hartman was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole for first-degree murder, plus 40 years for kidnapping, to be served consecutively, with no reduction, and no possibility of clemency. As Zoe was led out of the courtroom, she turned her head for a moment, not to look at Evan, nor at Lena's family. Her gaze simply swept across the entire room, silent and chilling, as if she were memorizing every face present on the day her story came to an end. And then, just as she had entered, Zoe left the courtroom, without uttering a single word. But to fully understand that silence, and why it sent chills down people's spines, one must look back at the journey that led to this tragedy. A journey that didn't begin in the courtroom, but many months earlier, in moments that seemed entirely harmless. For 3 months, Zoe stalked Lena. 3 months that passed quietly like underground water. No one heard it, no one saw it, yet it flowed powerfully beneath the surface of normal life. When investigators pieced together the final fragments, they realized this story didn't begin with a sudden outburst, but with tiny, almost invisible signs. Zoe's gaze always lingered longer whenever Lena was mentioned. Seemingly casual questions that were actually designed to memorize the victim's schedule. Unexplained drives past Lena's rented house, and anonymous accounts following Lena on social media that no one thought to trace back. Individually, those things were too small to draw attention, but when combined, they formed the map of an obsession growing day by day. A darkness nourished by insecurity, jealousy, and a sense of losing control. The contrast between the two women became stark in hindsight. Lena lived fully for the future, training with hope, competing with ambition, each day moving forward, as if climbing a slope she believed would end in light. Zoe, meanwhile, withdrew behind soft smiles and quiet words, silently nurturing a sense of being threatened, not by Lena's actions, but by the image of herself in her relationship with Evan. For 3 months, Zoe lived in 2 parallel worlds. On the outside, she went to work, taught yoga, and greeted neighbors. On the inside, she mapped Lena's routes, analyzed every Strava run, every check-in photo, every few-second story. It was precisely the gap between those 2 worlds that kept everyone around her completely unaware of what was happening. This is the raw truth of the case. Violence doesn't always wear a menacing face. Sometimes it takes the form of silence, of someone everyone thinks is fine, of emotions no one knows are fermenting in the dark. Lena Morris's case sends a clear warning for an era in which every moment of life can be tracked remotely. Sharing location on social media, even just to update friends, can easily become a tool for those with ill intent. Strava, Instagram, apps created to connect communities, unintentionally open doors for those seeking others' vulnerabilities. And there's an even deeper warning. Romantic obsession, when not recognized and properly addressed, can turn into a silent form of violence, the kind that makes no noise, leaves no warning signs, until it's too late, and sometimes comes from the very people we believe are the safest. Lena Morris lived fully until the very last moment, but her death reminds us that danger sometimes isn't out on the course. It stands right at the edge of the frame, where we pay the least attention. And finally, when the story closes, two statements become the most heartbreaking yet accurate summary of this tragedy. Her last ride was with a man she trusted, but someone else was already waiting to kill her. The story of Lena Morris and Zoe Hartman is not just a personal tragedy, but also a mirror reflecting a very real issue in contemporary American life: the dangerous intersection of social media, location data, and uncontrolled emotions. In the 3 months before the crime, Zoe silently tracked Lena's every movement through Strava, Instagram, and the information Lena herself unknowingly made public. The convenience of technology, something most Americans use daily, became the tool for Zoe to build a complete tracking map: workout times, cycling routes, times she returned home. Many people in the United States share similar data without realizing the risks. From this perspective, the first lesson is to limit real-time location sharing. Fitness apps, coffee shop check-ins, or social media stories can all be exploited by someone with intent, even if we think they're just acquaintances. Another detail in the story is particularly noteworthy. Zoe showed no obvious signs of danger. She was polite, well-mannered, had no criminal record. This reflects a reality of American life. Violence doesn't always come from shady figures. Sometimes it comes from people everyone believes are completely normal. Therefore, paying attention to controlling and obsessive behaviors, such as invading privacy, monitoring habits, or repeatedly questioning schedules, is extremely important, especially in romantic relationships. Finally, this story reminds each person to proactively build their own safety network, share schedules with trusted people, notify someone when arriving or leaving a location, and stay alert when someone appears unusually often around where you live. The United States is a vast country with high personal freedom, but that very freedom demands greater awareness of self-protection. Lena did nothing wrong. She simply lived the life she loved. But her story reminds us that sometimes safety isn't in the speed we ride, but in the information we choose to share, and the people we allow into our world. Thank you for following this haunting story. If you found it valuable, please hit subscribe so you don't miss real cases that help us view the world more cautiously. See you in the next video, where every story is a reminder that knowledge can save our own lives.